Let's be very clear right from the start. This is not just another offseason for the Dallas Cowboys. This is not just another free agency cycle where fans get excited, mock contracts on Twitter, and then watch the teams sign bargain veterans on one-year deals. The 2026 NFL free agency period is a referendum. A referendum on Jerry Jones. A referendum on the Cowboys' front office philosophy. And a referendum on whether this organization truly understands how championships are built in the modern NFL. Because for the first time in years, the Cowboys will not be able to hide behind the usual excuses. The salary cap excuse is gone. The "we're resetting the roster" excuse is gone. The "we believe in our young guys" excuse will wear thin very quickly. Dallas will have money. Dallas will have options. And Dallas will be staring at a free agent class loaded with players who directly address the team's biggest flaws. The only real question left is this. Will the Cowboys finally act like a desperate contender, or will they continue to behave like a comfortable brand? When you study this 2026 free agent class, one thing jumps out immediately. The league is offering Dallas solutions at almost every pressure point on the roster. Running back, offensive tackle, edge rusher, linebacker, secondary. This is not a thin market. This is not a year where you have to convince yourself that mid-tier players are secretly stars. These are real names, real production, real impact. And that's why this free agency is so dangerous for Dallas, because if they fail again, there will be no one left to blame but themselves. Let's start with a position that has quietly defined the Cowboys' offensive inconsistency over the last few seasons, running back. For years, Dallas has tried to outthink the position. They've treated it like a plug-and-play role, something you can rotate cheaply and survive. And while that worked for some teams, it has not worked for a Cowboys offense that still relies heavily on timing, play action, and defensive manipulation. That's where a player like Breece Hall changes everything. Breece Hall is not just a running back. He is an offensive weapon who forces defensive coordinators to alter their game plan before the ball is even snapped. He can run inside zone, outside zone, gap concepts, and he can motion out wide and win against linebackers in space. If Breece Hall is in a Cowboys uniform, suddenly linebackers hesitate. Safeties creep forward. Play action becomes believable again, and the entire offense breathes. Yes, he will be expensive, but championship windows are not built on discounts. Then you look at Travis Etienne, and you see a different kind of solution. Etienne brings speed, fluidity, and mismatchability. He thrives in space. He's dangerous on screens, angle routes, and wheel routes. In a Cowboys offense that has sometimes felt rigid and predictable, Etienne injects creativity. He allows you to stress defenses horizontally, not just vertically. He fits the modern NFL, where explosive plays often come from simple concepts executed by elite athletes. Kenneth Walker, on the other hand, represents controlled chaos. He is violent, decisive, and relentless. He's the type of back you hand the ball to in the fourth quarter when everyone in the stadium knows what's coming, and it doesn't matter. For a Cowboys team that has struggled to close games late in the season, Walker offers identity. He brings an edge that Dallas has lacked since its most physical offenses. And then there are value options like J.K. Dobbins and Tyler Allgeier, backs who may not dominate headlines, but dominate contact. These are tone setters. These are players who make defenses feel every carry. For a front office that loves flexibility, this is where smart aggression can live. But offense does not survive without protection, and that brings us to one of the most uncomfortable truths about the Cowboys. The offensive line is no longer a strength. It's a question mark. This is why the 2026 free agent tackle class is critical. Braden Smith represents stability. He's not flashy, but he's reliable, powerful, and technically sound. He gives you competence at a premium position, something Dallas has taken for granted in the past. Jonah Williams offers versatility and experience. He's played in big games. He's seen elite pass rushers. He understands NFL trench warfare. For a team trying to protect its quarterback investment, that matters. Veterans like Cam Robinson, Trent Brown, and Kelvin Beachum all represent different levels of risk and reward. Brown brings size and power. Robinson brings athleticism. Beachum brings professionalism and experience. These are not long-term fantasies. These are real solutions to real problems. If Dallas ignores this position again, it won't be optimism. It will be negligence. Defensively, the conversation becomes even more urgent when you talk about pass rush. Championship defenses do not rely on hope. They rely on pressure. And this 2026 class is loaded with edge defenders who can tilt the field. Trey Hendrickson is relentless. He wins with effort, technique, and motor. He doesn't need perfect conditions to be effective. He creates chaos. Jalen Phillips brings explosiveness and upside. He's the type of defender who forces offenses to slide protection, and that alone creates opportunities for everyone else. Then there are names that still carry fear: Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. Yes, they're veterans. Yes, there are durability questions. But when healthy, they still command respect. And sometimes, respect is all you need to change how an offense plays. Add players like Kwity Paye, and suddenly Dallas has options. Real options. Not developmental hopes, immediate contributors. At linebacker, speed is the currency of the modern NFL, and this class delivers. Devin Lloyd, Quincy Williams, and Quay Walker all represent range, aggression, and sideline-to-sideline ability. These are linebackers who can survive in space, who can chase quarterbacks, who can close passing lanes. For a Cowboys defense that has been exposed by misdirection and athletic quarterbacks, this matters. Even value veterans like Alex Singleton and Eric Wilson offer intelligence and toughness, traits that don't always show up on the stat sheet, but win games in December. Finally, the secondary, the last line of defense, and often the difference between good teams and great ones. Corners like Jamal Dean, Alani Taylor, Eric Stokes, Rick Woolen, and Greg Newsome too offer length, physicality, and scheme flexibility. These are not panic signings. These are players you build coverage plans around. At safety, names like Cam Curl, Jaquan Brisker, Reed Blankenship, Kobe Bryant, and Jalen Thompson give Dallas versatility. Box safeties, deep safeties, hybrid defenders, the kind of players who allow defensive coordinators to disguise intentions and steal possessions. So when you zoom out and look at the entire picture, one thing becomes painfully obvious. The 2026 free agent market is not the problem. The money will not be the problem. The talent will not be the problem. The only problem left is courage. Will Jerry Jones finally treat free agency like a weapon instead of a risk? Will the Cowboys finally stop waiting for everything to align perfectly? Or will this be another year where opportunity passes and excuses replace ambition? Because in 2026, history won't care about intentions. It will only remember decisions. The search is finally over in Dallas. After weeks of interviews, speculation, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering, the Cowboys have reached the end of their defensive coordinator hunt, and they believe they've found not just an answer, but a potential long-term solution. The organization is in the process of finalizing a deal with Christian Parker, with both sides already in agreement on terms, setting the stage for Parker to become the fourth defensive coordinator in as many seasons for the Cowboys. That number alone tells you everything you need to know about the urgency of this hire. Brian Schottenheimer and the front office understood what was at stake. Defensive instability has plagued this team for years, and cycling through coordinators has created scheme changes, developmental setbacks, and a lack of identity. This time, the Cowboys cast a wide net, not just to fill a vacancy, but to ensure that when this deal becomes official, it's the last time they're conducting this search for quite some time. And in Christian Parker, they believe they've landed someone who can finally bring continuity, innovation, and accountability to the defensive side of the ball. At just 34 years old, Parker represents the new generation of NFL defensive minds, young, adaptable, and deeply connected to modern offensive trends. Most recently, he showcased his defensive acumen with the Philadelphia Eagles, where his work quickly drew league-wide attention during this coaching cycle. Several teams were interested. Opportunities existed elsewhere. But when it came time to choose, Parker elected to cross enemy lines and sign on with Dallas for 2026, and, in the Cowboys' hopes, far beyond. Sometimes, the best way to solve a problem is to study it from the inside. Schottenheimer clearly understands that reality. By pursuing Parker, the Cowboys weren't just filling a role. They were making a calculated strike against their most bitter division rival. In one move, they weakened the Eagles' coaching staff while strengthening their own. And just as importantly, they tapped directly into the Vic Fangio coaching tree, a system that has historically given Dak Prescott and the Cowboys' offense significant trouble. That alone makes this hire fascinating. But Parker's resume stands on its own merit. A former wide receiver turned cornerback, Parker brings a rare dual perspective to defensive coaching. He understands route concepts, timing, leverage, and how offenses want to attack coverage. That background has shaped his coaching philosophy since the very beginning of his career, which started in 2013 at Virginia State as a defensive backs coach. 2 years later, he took on the same role at Norfolk State, continuing to refine his approach to player development and technique. From there, Parker's rise accelerated. He earned opportunities at Notre Dame and Texas A&M, two programs known for demanding both schematic discipline and elite recruiting. Those stops opened the door to the NFL, where Parker joined the Green Bay Packers, followed by the Denver Broncos, a pivotal chapter in his career. It was in Denver where Parker spent time working under Vic Fangio, absorbing the principles of a defense built on disguise, leverage, and calculated aggression. That experience would later come full circle when he reunited with Fangio in Philadelphia, helping implement a system that became one of the league's most effective pass defenses. The results speak loudly. With Parker's influence in the secondary, Fangio's Eagles defense allowed the sixth fewest passing yards and the fewest passing touchdowns in the NFL during the 2025 season. Even more impressive was the development of young talent. Under Parker's guidance, players like Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean didn't just improve. They exploded into first-team All-Pro caliber performers. That ability to accelerate development is not theoretical. It's proven. Before Philadelphia, Parker played a central role in shaping Patrick Surtain II during his time in Denver. Surtain didn't merely become good. He became elite, evolving into a 3-time All-Pro and one of the most respected cornerbacks in football. Coaches don't stumble into results like that by accident. And there's another layer here that can't be ignored. By hiring Parker, the Cowboys gain a wealth of insider knowledge about the Eagles. Not just personnel, but tendencies, stress points, and offensive vulnerabilities. In a division as competitive and familiar as the NFC East, that information is invaluable. It won't win games by itself, but it can tilt margins, influence game planning, and steal critical possessions. This is the man who will now be coordinating the Dallas Cowboys defense. It's a massive get, one defined by upside, fresh ideas, and a modern understanding of how to combat today's NFL offenses. For a team desperate to stabilize its defensive identity and stop wasting elite talent, Christian Parker represents something the Cowboys haven't had in years, a chance to finally get it right. Now comes the hard part, execution. But for the first time in a long time, Dallas didn't just fill a vacancy. They made a statement. The Dallas Cowboys are heading into one of the most important off-seasons in recent memory, and everything feels connected. Roster decisions, cap management, coaching changes, and long-term identity are all colliding at once. And that's why the conversation around George Pickens has become so fascinating. This isn't just about a wide receiver contract. It's about how Dallas wants to build, how patient they're willing to be, and whether they're ready to think creatively instead of emotionally. George Pickens is the biggest name the Cowboys have entering free agency, and that alone creates pressure. Elite receivers don't come cheap anymore, and Pickens is going to command a significant cap hit if Dallas lets this play out traditionally. The franchise tag is an obvious option, but tagging a receiver is no longer a neutral move. It locks up cap space, delays clarity, and sometimes creates tension with the player. That's why the idea of sign and trade has real merit here. It allows Dallas to control the asset while avoiding a long-term financial commitment they may not be fully comfortable with. If you step back and look at the league, there are several teams that believe they're one elite receiver away from legitimate Super Bowl contention. Those teams are usually aggressive, cap flexible, and willing to part with premium draft capital. Dallas Cowboys Wire floated the idea that Pickens' value could be roughly equivalent to a pick in the low 20s, and when you look at the market, that actually feels realistic. Receivers of his caliber rarely become available in their prime, especially without injury concerns. Buffalo stands out immediately. The Bills are in win-now mode, and Josh Allen has been carrying an offense that lacks consistent explosiveness outside of its core weapons. A receiver like Pickens could stretch the field when one-on-one matchups and take pressure off Allen in critical moments. Buffalo also has the draft capital to make it work without crippling their future, which is exactly the kind of trade Dallas should be looking for. San Francisco is another intriguing possibility. The 49ers have been creative with their cap, aggressive with their roster, and unafraid to make bold moves. Adding Pickens to an already dangerous offense could push them over the top. And while they don't draft high, their ability to maximize late picks makes a trade more palatable. From Dallas' perspective, getting multiple picks while avoiding a massive extension is a smart long-term play. The Chargers make sense for similar reasons. They have a quarterback who needs more reliable weapons, a front office that understands urgency, and enough flexibility to absorb a receiver contract. New England is a different case entirely, but equally interesting. They're rebuilding, they have cap space, and they need a true offensive centerpiece. A deal involving Pickens could accelerate their timeline, especially if they believe they've solved their quarterback situation. Indianapolis and Carolina are more speculative, but not impossible. Both teams need offensive identity, and sometimes that starts with a player who forces defenses to change how they line up. The wild card, of course, is Pittsburgh. The irony of Pickens potentially returning to the team that moved on from him isn't lost on anyone. But circumstances change. Coaches change. Philosophies change. And if Pittsburgh believes Pickens has matured or that their new leadership can manage him differently, that door isn't completely closed. What makes this decision even more complex is what's happening on the coaching side of the ball, particularly on defense. The Cowboys are actively interviewing defensive coordinator candidates, and that process is unfolding in real time. Christian Parker coming in for an in-person interview is significant. It shows Dallas is serious about continuity and internal development, but also aware of the competition. The fact that Parker is scheduled to fly to Green Bay immediately after should raise alarms. If Dallas truly believes he's the right guy, they may need to act fast. Green Bay losing Jeff Hafley to Miami created a vacuum, and Parker is familiar with that organization. If the Cowboys hesitate, they could lose a candidate they clearly value. This is one of those moments where decisiveness matters. Waiting too long can cost you more than just a coach. It can cost you momentum. Meanwhile, other options are disappearing. Jeff Ulbrich is off the board, retained by Atlanta, and that tells you something important. Teams are prioritizing stability on defense, and quality coordinators aren't going to sit around waiting. That's why the name Sean McDermott deserves serious discussion. He may be known as a head coach, but at his core, he's a defensive architect. His track record speaks for itself. Turnovers, discipline, consistency. Those are hallmarks of his defenses. If McDermott doesn't land another head coaching job, Dallas should absolutely explore the possibility. Pairing a ball-hawking defensive philosophy with elite talent like Micah Parsons could elevate this unit to another level. And speaking of Parsons, the fact that Green Bay is interviewing candidates who could potentially coach him only underscores how valuable defensive leadership is right now. All of this ties back to the original question: what kind of team do the Cowboys want to be? Do they want to lock themselves into another massive receiver contract and hope everything else falls into place? Or do they want flexibility, draft capital, and the ability to build a deeper